Good morning. It is April 28th, 2021. This is Steve Onsman. I'm the pastor of Calvary United Church of Christ. I'm glad you're watching or going to see this later when I post it. Hope you'll share it if you find it helpful. So here is the question for today. I had a couple weeks off and I'm glad to be back. Um, so this is from Elliot Warner. Elliot is way better with Old Testament stuff than I am, and he asked me this really interesting question. And he says the term Ten Commandments appears only three times in the Hebrew Bible, none of which seem to be in the context that refers to what we usually think of as the Ten Commandments, the ones we find in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. In Exodus 34:27, the term seems to refer to a set of commandments beginning in 34:11 that again are not they don't resemble the Ten Commandments. In Deuteronomy 4, the term may refer to the Ten Commandments in the coming chapter, but it's somewhat remote from them. And in the context, it is somewhat unclear what it's referring to. And anyway, there in Deuteronomy 10, the term Ten Commandments clearly refers to what was written on the stone tablets that Moses smashed when he got angry and saw the golden calf. Yeah. And as chapters 32 and 34 of Exodus make clear, the broken tablets are the same as the replacement tablets described in Exodus 34. Can we clear this up? I'm not sure I can. I will try. Um, so Elliot's question, of course, is part of the answer, and it would take way longer than I have to make it clear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit actually about how Scripture in general is developed, how it comes to be. And there's something called, well, there's a number of them over history, but one in particular, the Graf Wellhausen documentary hypothesis. Sounds like something out of the Big Bang Theory, doesn't it? These two men were theologians in the 19th century, and they were part of a movement that began earlier than them that delved into the very thing that Elliot is asking about. Why are there differences between stories, or sometimes in the same book, between the same story is described? Like, if you look at the flood, there's two versions of the flood story in Genesis. So one thing is that almost every book and letter, in fact, probably every one of them of the Bible, was edited over time. They weren't written as is. The Bible was not put together as is. It took thousands of years for it to come together. Um, so somebody, for example, in the first century gets a copy of the Gospel of Luke and reads through it and says, no, that didn't happen that way. And edit it, just writes a little note on the side like you and I might in a book, and then they pass it on, and the next person makes a copy and they include that into it. That's part of the fancy stuff we learn in seminary, and that's how the Bible is developed. Now, most people don't preach about this or don't teach about it. I do, but a lot of people don't, because they're afraid you all won't get it, but I know you will because you're smart. So in studying the Tanakh, which is the name for what we call the Old Testament, we also know that in at least in the Torah, there are four traditions that were sort of all pieced in and merged: the Jehovist or Yahwist, it's called either one, the Elohist, the Deuteronomist, and the priestly sources. I'm not going to explain them, just say that these are different, probably different factions or different tribes that came together early on in the existence of Israel, and they had their own tradition of the story. Um, Another issue that arises in all of this question is even the order of the books of the Bible are different. And that affects how we understand it. For example, in the Tanakh has the Torah, right? The Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, not in that order, but um, has them first. And then, of course, the prophets, and then the wisdom writings. And one rabbi explained it to me some years ago that it's ordered in this way: God spoke directly, then God spoke through people, the prophets. Then God was silent. So the people had to speak for God. So now we get the Psalms and other writings like that. Um, but the writers of the New Testament organize the Tanakh differently for their own purposes. It always is for their own purposes. So why? They put the prophets last. The reason is that Malachi, one of the minor prophets, is really where we get this idea that for the Messiah to come, Elijah must return first. And of course, Malachi is last. It's right at the end of the book. And Jesus said that John the Baptist was Elijah, and we say that Jesus is the Messiah. So that's why we put it there. Then through history, of course, then there was the Protestant Reformation. There were different people doing similar but also different things as far as rebelling against the Catholic Church, and calling into question not just Rome's authority to interpret Scripture, but the facts themselves. He started questioning, and this uh, then led to the rise of humanism. Spinoza, if you've ever read Spinoza, he was a brilliant guy. Only lived to be 45, I think, and he lived in the mid to late 17th century, where he began and others began to question the miraculous nature of the scriptures, and denying them. So, which of course was the root, I think, of enlightenment, which is what much of mainline Protestantism is sees as foundational, an intellectual approach to understanding scripture. And of course, a lot of this then led to the formation of fundamentalism, which then would go against any intellectualizing or at least questioning or interpreting of the Bible. So when we look at differences in Scripture, what we have to admit is that there are some inconsistencies, a lot of inconsistencies. The fact that we have two creation stories, for example, very different from each other. We blend them together. We have two different Christmas stories. Again, very different, but we blend them together. But if you look at them, at least you try to look at them carefully, um, and each one individually, you'll find that there are some differences. How do we explain that? Well, I can't. I'm not as smart as the people who came before me and did all this, but I will tell you that that's why we do, as Paul said, we take it with a grain of salt. That's all I have today. What do you think? Send me an email, a message, call me. I'm always looking for questions to grapple with. I'm running down on them, and send them to me, and I will do one on a future Wednesday Word. So stay safe out there. Get your vaccine, wash your hands still, keep your distance, wear your mask, and I will see you next week. Have a great day.